If you have ever dread the question, what do you do in a social or networking event? Then this episode is for you. As evaluators, we work in many different spaces, type of organizations, with different populations. We even use different tools and methodologies. But if there's one thing that I think all of us have in common, is the experience of someone asking us, what do you do? And trying to explain what we do as evaluators and the dread, sometimes the awkwardness that comes with this question. Nonetheless, being able to explain in a clear way what it is that we do is so important because you never know who that person is. Maybe they're the leader of a nonprofit organization that is looking for an evaluation consultant. Maybe they're actually a manager who's hiring for someone to help them evaluate their programs. Maybe they're just a friend who might see a position on LinkedIn that is perfect for you. Unless these people actually know what it is that you do, they won't be able to think about you. This May, I was at the Canadian Evaluation Society conference in Edmonton, and I asked a few attendees to share what are the most ridiculous things that people have said when they tell them that they do evaluation. And then I also asked them how they actually explain what evaluation is. So if what I said at the beginning of this episode resonated with you, then you'll want to hear what all of them had to say. Welcome to another episode of The Evaluation Couch, the podcast where we talk about career growth and the field of evaluation. I'm your host, Maria Montenegro. So nice to be back in this couch. I have been taking a little break from the podcast, but I'm so excited to be back. I will be sharing over the next few weeks what I've been up to and what I'm going to be up to in the second half of 2026. But for now, I'm just very excited to finally release this episode that I started recording in May at the Canadian Evaluation Conference in Edmonton. This conference always has a really warm spot in my heart. This year was extra special because the conference was in Edmonton, where I spent 10 years of my life. It was my first home in Canada, and it was really fun to go back, show the city around to some of my new and existing evaluation friends, and just reconnecting with the evaluation community, which is always such a good time and such a good reminder of why I do what I do. This is not the first time that I do a live episode at a conference, but every time that I've done this, I do one thing. I ask people to introduce themselves, and I explicitly ask them to not use any job titles or any organizations. And I do this because I have noticed that many times we tend to kind of hide ourselves, shelter ourselves behind a job title and an organization, and we tie our identity too much around those. Many times we think that they, by themselves, explain what we do and who we are as evaluators. But the reality is, most of the times, they don't. When we say, I do evaluation, I'm a senior evaluator, I'm a director of evaluation, most people do not know what we're talking about. Yet, when we're meeting new people, whether in a social environment or in a more professional environment, we tend to use these words that most people do not understand. The second reason why I think it's so important to do this is because I think it's important for us to not tie our identity of who we are as evaluators and as people to something that is really temporary and outside our control, like our job titles and our organizations. If you think about it, your job title, your current employer, your current employment situation can change 6 months from now. We also saw it happening in 2025, where many organizations and businesses that employed evaluators basically within a month disappeared. And if this is the case and the identity that you have been using to introduce yourself, to share what you do with others, has been so tied to something that isn't really yours, it's just borrowed, it's just a part of who you are at the moment, then if anything was to happen, be it funding cuts, layoffs, be it you change to a new chapter because of personal or professional reasons, then you basically have to start from zero, introducing yourself and creating a new narrative of who you are. So I think it's very important to start talking about ourselves as people and evaluators who we are, rather than as the job titles we hold and the organizations where we work. So without further ado, I would love for you to hear about the people, the amazing evaluators that contributed to this episode by answering a couple of questions at the Canadian Evaluation Society conference.
My name is Evan Poncelet, and I am losing my voice at the end of the CES 2026 conference because I have talked nonstop during this conference.
Hi, I'm Beth Snow. I'm an evaluator who evaluates programs in healthcare.
Hi, my name is Sujan. I'm an evaluator. I stay home with my cat all day, and I have a background in adult education and policy. And so I like making things that people can actually read and engage with because education is important.
My name is Nelson, and it's been 15 years since I'm in this evaluation field. And as a lot of other evaluators, I really love data.
My name is Roman Katznelson. I'm an evaluator based in Calgary.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carolyn Hosler. I'm an evaluator who also cross-stitches. So I often think of this as where I get my patients from, because if you can put 1,000 points on a fabric, you can probably go through a whole evaluation process.
Hello, my name is Judy, and I'm an evaluator in the federal government. And I'm very much about professional learning and mentoring.
Hi, I'm Karen Jackson, and I'm an evaluator who is deeply engaged in community engaged research and leadership development.
Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'm an evaluator living in Vancouver, and I'm obsessed with orcas.
Amazing. I love that combination of how people chose to introduce themselves, some focusing a little bit more on their professional aspect, others sharing hobbies or little fun facts about them. So the first thing that I asked this amazing group of people was, what is the most hilarious or ridiculous thing that someone has said to them after they say they are evaluators or they do evaluation? I think there's definitely a trend of answers that people receive that are not necessarily funny or ridiculous, but I do think it's interesting as evaluators to just reflect on the common reactions people have when they hear about our profession and what we do. Perhaps one of the most common reactions just being silence.
I can't think of any ridiculous things. It's just always the same blank stare of either like, tell me more, or how do I get out of this conversation?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard one. Usually it's just a blank stare. They often get like, what do you evaluate? I guess is when they recover from the shock of not knowing what I'm saying.
I have definitely received some of these reactions. Another response that seems to be a trend is people confusing evaluation with auditing or with human resource evaluation. A few others actually shared that people do tend to be more curious and they want to understand. So they ask questions like, what? What is evaluation? What do you evaluate? What does that look like?
Oh, so you do job assessments for people? You're in HR? I mean, auditor often comes up. I don't know what the most absurd thing is that I've heard, though. That's a good question.
Oh gosh. The most ridiculous thing? I feel like most people just don't know what it is. I don't know. I think they're like, what do you evaluate? And then what sector do you work in? And then I'm like, oh, I'm in consulting, so I do all things. And then they're like, what? And then they're like, are you in auditing? And I'm like, no, it's not auditing. And then when I say I do qualitative research, they get really confused because they're like, what is that?
Sometimes people tell me, what does that mean? Are you talking about, for example, evaluate people, right? So they mix up evaluation, program evaluation or project evaluation with performance evaluation in human resources.
I think the thing that makes me laugh the most about when I tell people I'm an evaluator is they ask, what do you evaluate?
What's that? That's the question I get most of the time is, what's an evaluator?
And I think what Caroline reflected on when it comes to people's reactions to her being an evaluator was super interesting.
I think one of the big ones I get is I work in a lot of spaces where I may be the only person doing evaluation, or I may be in a space where I'm there because of other technical aspects of my knowledge. And one of the things I get a lot of is I'm assumed not to be the person who knows statistics. So I don't look like the statistical analysis person. I don't look like the Excel person. I don't look like the dashboard person or the AI person. And I often wonder what person they have in mind. And so I often get that one. I also get the one that sometimes just goes, oh, isn't that just research?
The second question I asked all of these people is, okay, so once you move past the shock or the awkwardness or the confusion, how do you actually explain to people what it is that you do? This is the part of the episode that I'm the most excited for because I am a person that learns from examples. And I think it was so cool to hear how different people go about explaining what it is that they do. And I hope this is an inspiration for you to come up with your way of explaining to others what evaluation is. So among the responses that I got, there's definitely some people that just have developed this plain language, simple explanation of what evaluation is. I loved some of these examples because the evaluation jargon is definitely not something that the average person is going to understand.
In short terms, we collect data and stories to help understand why a program worked or didn't work so that it can learn to do better in the future.
I explained that I evaluate programs or policies. I look at whether programs are doing what they're meant to do and if they're doing it in an efficient manner and spending the tax-paying dollars in the best way.
Well, evaluation is how to collect data and transform those data into information so that decision makers can make decisions.
I usually say I work with healthcare programs to help them figure out what's working well and what could work better.
I think I say I tell people whether or not their programs are working and the kind of impact that they made and how to communicate that.
I really like how these simple sentences can be a conversation starter rather than perhaps intimidating people to ask and want to learn more. In some of these examples, you will also see how people have added these additional little details about the context in which they work, which I think is a very cool and easy way of personalizing your way of explaining what evaluation is and what you do. I also got more complex ways of explaining what evaluation is, such as this one from Roman.
I think evaluation is strategic learning made rigorous and systematic in organizational conversations and organizational processes. It's a way to transform an organization from being centered by action to being centered by learning as well as action.
Evan and Caroline did something that I really appreciated, which was describing how they really think about who their audience is, and then they shape the message according to their audience.
I mean, it's so dependent. Depends on how much time we have, who I'm talking to, if they're a researcher or if they're completely out of the research world. At the very basic, I will often say something along the lines of, my organization funds research, and it's my job to find out the impact of that research and if it's helping Saskatchewan people, because I'm based in Saskatchewan. I feel like that is my quickest and most basic way of saying it. I also sometimes say it's kind of like applied research, but I feel like some evaluators would be upset about that. Some are very intent on making the distinction between applied research and evaluation. But if I'm talking to a researcher and they know what applied research is, I feel like I'll start there and then build on that. And I feel like it's always different. It's never one and the same. Sometimes I talk about methods. Sometimes I talk about just talking with people and learning about impacts of programs. It's variable.
I try to tie it to their needs. So I may say something like, oh, okay, well, you know how we're really interested in saying our graduates do this, or we're really interested in aiming to build trust in this community. There's a way we could actually see if that's happening. And then I just leave it at that and just kind of see where they want to go with it. If they start dismissing it, I know the conversation's kind of ending. If I know that they're curious now, can we go from curiosity into something?
And Karen does a really great job at showcasing how we can integrate storytelling to engage people so that they are more curious and understand what it is that we do.
I usually try to tell a story. So I might say, so let's say you have a recipe and you are telling your family all about this great recipe that you're going to make and you're describing it to them. and you are inviting them to eat it. And so afterwards, you ask them, how was it? Give me some feedback. That's a way of evaluating your cooking. So, I mean, people then kind of, they want to know more after you tell a story.
I'm always grateful when evaluators agree to be part of the podcast and share their different perspectives. My takeaway from listening to this group of evaluators with varied experiences and context in which they work is that there's no right way or only way of explaining what evaluation is. But it is important to develop a way in which you can confidently and clearly respond to the question of what it is that you do. People that you meet throughout your career are only going to be able to think of you when opportunities come up if they understand who you are and what value you have to offer. And the foundation for that is knowing that you are an evaluator. So I hope that this episode gave you some examples, ideas, and inspiration to work through your own answer that feels natural and that feels aligned with who you are as an evaluator. I encourage you to start developing this answer and put it into practice next time you meet someone in a social or a professional setting, because you never know where you might be meeting a potential client, a potential employer, or a potential collaborator.